I'll tell you who it is.
Hello?
Yeah. Do you want to speak to him?
Is Gary's Sudbrink there?
Welcome to episode 89 of the 3am Fear podcast. In early 1992, a man named Steven Sudbrink was driving alone to Long Island, New York. It was a very important day. It was his wedding day. As he drove, he thought about his future, feeling both excited and nervous. As Steven got closer to the wedding venue, something caught his eye. In the rearview mirror of his car, he saw that there was a car following him. At first, he didn't think much about it. He thought maybe this was just a coincidence, and so he didn't do much about it. But as time passed, he realized that this car was tailing him. He decided he would speed up a little to see if the car would do the same. And just as he suspected, as he sped up, the car also sped up. But this time, the car pulled beside him. When Steven turned to look at the car, he was surprised. It was his older brother Gary's car. This was unexpected because Gary lived in Texas and Steven knew that he would be coming for the wedding, but he wouldn't be coming in his car, he would be coming by flight. Nevertheless, seeing his brother made Steven even more excited. He smiled and even waved at him. But something felt strange. Gary was staring at him. He was not looking at the road while driving. He had his face staring at Steven. That means he was turning and looking at Steven. Steven started to feel uneasy. And then Gary started making these strange faces. It looked like he was trying to smile, but he was not smiling. Steven could never explain what those faces were, but he said that he was scared for his life. At first, he thought that his brother was just joking and just messing around with him. But as time passed, he realized that Gary was not moving his head. He kept on staring at Steven and made these weird faces and just kept driving, not looking at the door. Just when Steven thought that nothing could be weirder, Gary's car sped up and disappeared down the road. Even though all of this was odd for Steven, it was his own wedding day, and so he didn't want to think much about it. And by the time he reached his wedding venue, he saw his brother Gary there. The wedding went perfectly, and later, when Steven was alone with Gary, he asked him what happened on the road. "Why were you acting so weird?" "Making faces at me?" Steven asked. Gary looked confused. "What are you talking about?" Steven explained how he had seen Gary driving alone, staring at him, making these strange expressions. But Gary just laughed, shook his head and said, "I never saw you before the wedding. I flew here, my car is still in my garage back in Texas." Both brothers left the conversation feeling unsettled. Gary believed that Steven must have seen a similar car and he was mistaken. But Steven was absolutely sure that it was Gary who was there. He was sure that the person who was staring at him and smiling was his very own brother. But right now, there was nothing that they could do about it. They didn't think much about it, but that is until 1 year later, when a strange man approached Gary at the airport. And that's when the mysterious phone calls began. Hello and welcome to the 3am Fear podcast. I'm Nikita Ferrao, mystery and thriller author. On this podcast, I talk about real crimes and real people. Due to the graphic nature of some of this content, listener discretion is advised. You can find the episode show notes on my website 3amfear.com. Let's get started. In February of 1993, Gary Sudbrink was working as a pharmacist at an Air Force base in San Antonio, Texas. One day, as he checked his schedule, he saw that he had 3 days off in a row. Now, if he left this area, he was supposed to report it and use it as his leave time. But he knew that no one was going to call him in, and so he decided to keep quiet. He would take a short trip to New York to visit his family, and no one at work was supposed to know. Gary hadn't been home much since his brother Steven's wedding, and he missed his friends and family, and he wanted to talk to his father about something strange that had happened recently. Now, you see, that afternoon, while packing his bags, Gary heard a loud noise outside. Curious, he stepped into the balcony, and just beyond the fence, he saw a helicopter that was hovering low, like just about 20 feet above the ground, and this helicopter was facing right at his apartment. Gary found this strange. He rushed inside to get his glasses so that he could see better. But by the time he came back, the helicopter was rising higher into the sky. Within minutes, it sped away. He had no idea why that helicopter was there, but he was sure that it was looking right at him. Later that day, at the airport, Gary was waiting at the terminal for his flight to New York when a man approached him. The man was slim, had brown hair, and wore an overcoat. He greeted Gary, and Gary politely responded. The man then started asking questions. "Where are you headed?" Gary answered casually, "Just visiting friends and family in New York for a few days." The man then asked him where he worked, and Gary told him that he was stationed at the nearby Air Force base. And that's when he noticed something odd. The man was holding a small notebook, and every time Gary answered, the man would write something down in his notebook. Then the man asked for Gary's full name. Gary started to feel uncomfortable. He was, of course, wearing his uniform, but because he was wearing a jacket on top, his name tag was hidden, and so the man couldn't read his full name. Unsure of what he should do next, Gary asked, "Why do you need my full name?" The man just smiled and said, "Don't worry, you won't get into trouble." That was enough for Gary. Something felt off about this whole conversation. And just as he was about to say something, his row was called in for boarding. He grabbed his bag, said a quick goodbye, and walked towards the plane, relieved that he would never have to see the stranger again. Gary took his seat and got comfortable. Soon, a man with long hair and glasses sat down next to him. Unlike the stranger that he met before, this man seemed normal. They made some small talk, and Gary started to relax. Just then, another passenger arrived, ticket in hand, and told the man that he was sitting in the wrong seat. The man stood up and let the other passenger sit down. As this passenger sat down right next to Gary, Gary got the shock of his life. It was the same stranger he had just met in the airport. The conversation continued, but this time the man started asking more and more questions. "Where are you going? When are you coming back?" But before Gary could answer, a flight attendant came and told the man that he was sitting in the wrong seat. The man stood up, but again didn't move far. Instead, he just walked one row behind and stood near the emergency exit. And then He started asking more questions. How do you spell your last name? How long are you staying in New York? Gary did not want to answer. Something felt off. He just wanted to get away from the stranger, but this man wouldn't let him alone. A moment later, the flight attendant came and made the man go to his actual seat, which was far behind in the plane. Gary didn't see him again, but the whole experience left him scared. When he landed in New York, the first thing he did was call his landlady back in Texas because he was scared that whoever this man was targeting him. So many questions, especially so many personal questions. He wanted to make sure that his apartment was safe because he was afraid that if someone tried to break in, because this man was going on asking him when he was going to come back, so if someone was going to break in and steal something, he wanted to know that his place was safe. He asked his landlady to keep an eye on the apartment, and then he took a cab to his parents' house. When Gary arrived, he told his father about the helicopter that he had seen outside his apartment. And to his surprise, his father found it odd too. In fact, earlier the same day, his father had also seen a helicopter. Later, Gary decided to catch up with his old friend Mike. He picked up the phone and called him. Mike answered, but sounded surprised. Hey, you sound better already. Gary frowned. Better? What do you mean? Mike chuckled. What do you mean? What do I mean? We just talked like 20 minutes ago. Gary's stomach dropped. He had never called Mike before now. In fact, before showing up at his parents' house, no one, absolutely no one, knew that he was coming to New York. He himself made this plan as a last-minute plan. So who had called Mike? Gary sat on the edge of his bed, confused. First, the strange helicopter outside his apartment, then the two odd men at the airport asking all these personal questions, and then his friend Mike saying that someone called him like 20 minutes ago. But Gary hadn't called Mike. Mike kept on saying on the line, "It sounded like you, but your voice was a little off, like you had a cold." The call was crackly, but I could still tell it was you, Mike said. Then something even stranger happened. Mike mentioned that this fake Gary had told him that he had landed at a different airport than the one that he actually arrived at. Gary's stomach tightened. This wasn't just a weird coincidence. Something was going on, and he had no idea what. Suddenly, he heard a beep on the phone. Someone else was calling him. It was late, 10:30 at night. He figured it must be an important call because who would call him so late in the night? He quickly told Mike that he would call him back and then switched calls. Gary listened for a moment, and then his face went pale. He quickly reached for the answering machine and hit the record button. This would be the first of the several strange calls to the Sudbrink home. This is call number 1.
Yes. I'll tell you who it is.
Hello?
Yeah. Do you want to speak to him?
Is Gary's Sudbrink there?
Yeah, who's this? Steven? Are you playing games with me or what? Huh? Steven, if you're playing games, I'm going to kick your ass.
So how long are you going to be back from Texas?
Huh?
You're being impersonated by the other voice.
Yeah, this is you, Steven, you idiot. You're pissing me off. Jerk. I'm going to get you on... Let's see what it says. Review. 1 new call out of area. Is Steven out of the area?
How long are you going to be back from Texas?
Wait, say that again?
You're being impersonated by the other voice.
Wait, hold on. Is Steven out of the calling area or what? What do you mean you don't know? He's in Queens. Well, who are you talking to? I don't know who the fuck.
Hello?
Hello?
Here's Gary's Sudbrink there.
Who is this? Sounds like a robot.
So
Hello?
how long are you going to be back from Texas?
What was that again, sir?
You're being impersonated by the other voice.
Oh, be quiet, Alpha. Sorry, would you see that again? Hello? Being impersonated by what voice?
Hello?
Yeah. Hello?
Here's Gary's Sudbrink there.
Yeah, hold on a second. Yeah, what is your question? I'll answer it.
So how long are you going to be back from Texas?
How long?
You're being impersonated by the other voice.
Right. When am I coming back? Is that your question? Okay, there was a break. Hold on. You want to know when I'm coming back to Texas? Oh, is that your question?
So how long are you going to be back from Texas?
How long am I going to be back from Texas? That question doesn't make any sense.
By the other voice.
Okay. I'll be coming back eventually. I can't tell you when. You should know that question, the answer to the questions, because you seem to know more about me than I do. You know what I'm saying?
Are you an intergalactic person?
Are you a space alien?
Sounds like he hung up.
I can't believe this.
He hung up, Gary.
See if he comes back.
All right, I'll hang up.
The more and more Gary thought about this, the more and more he was sure that these calls were coming from his very own brother, Stephen. The scariest or the most surprising part of all was that it seemed as if someone had recorded these voices and was just playing them over and over again, like a tape. The voice kept on saying, "You're being impersonated by the other voice." Gary would later go on to say that at times it felt as if this was a recording and it was being played over and over again. But at some times it felt as if there was a real human being who was trying to talk slow. Gary immediately called Mike to find out more about this phone call that he had received. But just 40 minutes later, Gary would receive the second phone call.
How long
Let me answer. First, you tell me, where are you calling from? Yeah, why don't you tell me where you're calling from?
Who is this?
What do you mean, who is this? You should know who it is. It's me, Gary. Wait, let me ask you this question. Where are you calling from? Okay, I'll be back. Excuse me? I can't hear too well. Yeah, it is a full moon out. That's true. Could you identify yourself? Identify yourself. Why are you calling me? Excuse me? I cannot hear too well.
Get on the other phone, it's better.
Hold on, let me switch phones.
Okay.
Okay, hold on. Now, who are you?
Keep an eye in the sky, he said. Keep an eye in the sky? Yeah. Can I talk to him?
Shh.
I had a sighting.
Okay, hold on. Say that. Repeat that again. Please repeat. Okay.
Near Orion.
Near Orion. Holy mackerel. Tonight or just when?
The full moon.
They told
So, double from here.
Repeat.
Tell him I like to talk to him.
Okay. Repeat last word. I'm hearing static.
Tell him I like to talk to him.
He hung up.
He hung up.
Hello?
In the second call, the voice seemed even less clear. It talked about watching the skies, and this, of course, sparked the interest of Gary and his UFO obsessed father. The more they discussed about it, the more they were sure that it had some links to UFO. The more Gary's father thought, the more he was sure that this had something to do with the UFO experience that he had, and that this was not Gary or any human being. At 11:38 p.m., a third phone call was made.
Stephen, this is not funny, you know.
Brian, it's not Stephen.
What do you mean, Brian?
I mean, Gary.
How do I know it's not Stephen?
It's not Stephen. Hello? I had a UFO experience in West Virginia, which you probably know. And I know that you're into an intergalactic person. Can you speak a little louder? Sir? Can you speak a little louder? Louder?
Let me speak to him, Dad. I guess I don't know what.
All right, I'll hang up so you can talk to me. He wants to talk to you.
Okay. Hello, can I help you?
Hello.
Yes. Yes, that's me. Yes, could you please identify yourself? Identify.
Oh, you're back from Texas.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm in Texas right now. Oh, he asked me a question. No, I'm in New York right now. You know that. Why are you asking me such a question? Yes. Stephen, if this is you, I swear to God, I'm going to be pissed. Huh? I'm trying to listen to him. Excuse me? Okay. Eventually, I'll be back from Texas. Could you speak more? Please speak more. I guess it's not Stephen. I believe it because I'm getting static. Let me go on this phone because I can never hear on this phone. Hold on. Okay. Okay, please speak. Hello?
Keep an eye on the sky.
Okay. Should I go out right now?
Right.
Right now?
The full moon.
Okay, see, I'm not sure where Orion is now, but we'll go outside.
It was showed double from me. Repeat that again?
Although Gary's father was moving more towards the UFO theory, Gary still had this feeling that his brother Steven had something to do with it. I mean, at Steven's wedding, he himself had said that he saw Gary in the car making all these strange faces. So, somewhere, he thought that maybe Steven had something to do with this. He thought that maybe Steven didn't want to come forward and talk about it, and that's why no one ever found out. Even though he wanted to believe that it was Steven, with more and more phone calls, Gary started to get more and more scared. At this point, even though the family couldn't actually understand what the voice was saying, they were using two phones. Gary's dad was listening on the upper line, while Gary was listening on the other line. Gary also had this thing in mind about his friend Mike, who spoke about the fake Gary calling him. Almost as if the person had listened to the conversation with Mike, the very next day at 10:21 p.m. on a quiet night, the phone rang again.
Yes, this is me. Can I speak to you? Can I ask why you're... Yes, can I ask why you're calling? Can I please ask... Yes, this is. Yes, that is me.
To be within this planet.
Say that again?
And this planet.
Leave?
We come
I'm staying right here.
to be within this planet.
Is this a joke or what?
To many. To be contacted. As the same with you.
I have to think about that. I'd like to see you.
To many. To be contacted. As the same with you.
Hey, let me tell you something. I've been listening to you, and I've had contacts with you.
Government interference? You have? Please explain what type of interference. Okay.
Visitations to be disrupted by them. Appears. Sun will rise from dark side of world. No.
The sun will rise from the dark side of the moon.
Okay, what branch of the government? What should I do?
Government interference.
Is that good for me or bad? They hung up.
Yeah.
On this fourth phone call, the person started talking about government interference and the fact that it came to be within the planet, as well as more references to the moon. No one could actually understand what this person was talking about. It almost seemed impossible not to connect the dots to Gary's family's strong belief in the UFO. It was as if a person was pranking them, and this person knew exactly what Gary's family believed in and used that belief to scare them. This would be the last phone call that the Sudbrink family would receive. There were a very few people whom Gary ever spoke to or told about these experiences. Gary's father was also listening to this, and he had his very own idea of what this could be. Now you see, the Sudbrink family had long believed in UFOs. A few weeks earlier, Gary's father and his uncle had traveled to West Virginia to visit the Green Bank Telescope, a massive radio telescope that had once collapsed under mysterious circumstances. Rumors were said that a UFO had something to do with it. While others were there, Gary's father and uncle said that they saw something, a strange object that was hovering over the observatory that night. They weren't sure what it was, but they convinced themselves that it was an UFO. Gary never saw the man from the airport again. His apartment was untouched when he returned, and life moved on. But the question always remained: what really happened? Gary didn't know what to believe. Had someone been playing a prank on him? If so, how did they know so much about him? Okay, let's assume that whoever called him knew something about his life. How did they know that he was traveling? Gary himself made this as a last-minute decision. The more Gary thought about it, the stranger things became. His father was convinced that the calls were not from a person. The first night that he listened, he believed that this was not a human being. Over time, Gary became more and more interested. He claimed to experience strange activities himself, like poltergeist activity. But as for the voice on the phone, the helicopter, the strange men at the airport, no one could figure out what was this happening to the family. Now remember, the phone calls were recorded. As he listened to these voice recordings from that night, something stood out. The words were slow and distorted, as if someone had edited that voice. Some people believe that it wasn't supernatural, but someone was playing this on a tape recorder at a very slow speed. There is one theory that kind of made sense. A few months earlier, a toy called the Talk Boy had become popular. It was a device that could record voices and then slow them down, making them sound deeper and scarier. Some thought that maybe a prank caller could have used this and then kept on calling them. To test this idea, people later started to speed up the recordings. Sure enough, the slowed down voice started to sound more and more human. I also found this Reddit post where some people said that they had sped up Gary's recordings and they could understand some things. But Gary didn't believe that it was so simple. Did someone just record, make it sound slow, and then call him to disturb him? But why? He didn't have any enemies. Could it have been just a prank? If it was a prank, it was a well-planned one. For starters, Gary hadn't told anyone that he was coming to New York. How could someone have planned such a big prank if no one knew that he was coming to New York? What about the man at the airport? That was suspicious. And then there was Mike's phone call. Who could have called Mike saying that he was Gary and that he got out of a different airport? Was that a mistake or was it intentional? It was also strange that no one ever came forward to claim responsibility for the phone calls. If it was a joke, why didn't someone come and say, "I did it. I was the one behind the joke"? For years, Gary kept recording to himself. He didn't write a book, he didn't do interviews, he just held on to the tapes. Some people thought that maybe Gary was doing this for money. If Gary did this for money, why didn't he use that when the phone calls first started so that he could get more and more fame and money out of it? More than a decade later, he attended a UFO conference. A woman named Sue was speaking about encounters with the mysterious men in black. After her talk, Gary went to her, gave her the CD, and said, "Listen to this." On that CD were the phone call recordings from 1993. It was Sue who later shared Gary's story with the world, and that is where UFO researchers, mystery enthusiasts, and everyone started getting excited. If Gary was making all of this up, if he was lying, why did he hide it for over a decade? Years after the phone call stopped, something else happened. Something small but unsettling. In 2001, Gary's mother was in the hospital receiving treatment. One day, the doctor said that Gary's sister had called to ask about the condition. Gary was shocked. He didn't have a sister. At first, he thought that maybe the doctor was mistaken, maybe the call was for someone else. But the doctor said that he was sure. After all that had happened, the fake phone calls, the impersonations, the strange figures at the airport, Gary couldn't help but wonder, had someone or something been pretending to be a Sudbrink this whole time? Was there someone within his family or within his circle who was not human? And if this was real, were they still out there? This is where Gary's story ends for now, at least for now. All those phone calls, what do you think about it? Do you think all of that was connected? The helicopter, the man, the phone calls, the lady who called saying that she was Gary's sister. Was it all a prank? Was it all connected? Was it someone who knew the family? Or was it an alien or a UFO? If you're listening to this on YouTube, please drop a comment on what do you think. Unfortunately, Spotify has blocked its comments in India. That's what I've been told. Please drop a comment in YouTube. The same episode is uploaded to YouTube. Please drop a comment there. I would like to know from you, do you think this is real or this is fake? Was it really a UFO? Or was it someone just playing a prank? A big thank you to all my fellow listeners who have been listening and supporting this episode. Your reviews, your listens mean a lot. If you love this episode, if you love the stories that I put out, then please do leave a rating on whichever podcasting platform you're listening from. It would really mean the world to me. Other than this, I also have a YouTube and an Instagram page. I'll link it in the description. Do check it out. I have different stories on Instagram and I'm planning to put out some short horror stories on YouTube. So do subscribe to my YouTube channel and stay tuned. I am also an author, love fiction stories. If you want to check out my free fiction book, I'll link it in the description. I'll also link my other account in the description where I talk about fiction writing, travel, and I also will soon start sharing fiction stories. So stay tuned. So do follow me there. Thank you so much for everything. That's all for this week. Stay kind, stay safe, and see you next week.